Welcome into the Sports Objective, the unofficial podcast of the Pirates. Very excited to have two great guests tonight. And first is one of our all-time favorites, especially not only favorite guest, Bubba, but I'm very excited anytime we can talk basketball, this particular case, college basketball. And we love this guy. I'm glad to have him back.
Yeah, there on the bottom of the screen, Mike DeCourcy, the Sporting News. Mike, welcome in.
Oh, it's very nice to be back. You guys know that I have some ties to ECU. My niece is a graduate, a 2020 graduate, a loyal Pirate, a graduate of nursing school. Is now going to work up in the Triangle as a pediatric ICU nurse. And she loved her time in Greenville, and we've got another niece in that household who never know, she might be on her way next year.
That would be fantastic. You need to come down to a game there in Williams Arena at Menzies Coliseum. Joe Dooley, I was telling you pre-show, he's doing a nice job. 14 returning starters. There was a tweet yesterday about all the returners. Jaden Gardner is really a great guy that you could build that program. And you told us a year or so ago that one of the previous times you're on to be patient with Joe, and he's building the program, doing it the right way, and really getting his, I hate to use the term because, as you know, Mike, when it's sports, everybody says to get his players in, but he really is getting his players in. And they're more, the recruiting he's doing now, Mike, is with the big boy league. We talk about the American all the time, how a great league it is. He's finally getting guys that really can play at that level.
Yeah, I think you noticed as last season progressed, they didn't obviously have the results that you would dream of, but you saw toward the end of last year, they had some really good performances, nearly knocking off Cincinnati. Cincinnati's fighting for a tournament bid, and you go down to the very last seconds into overtime, and Cincinnati needs that to win, and then you bounce back from that and play Memphis tough, and then you beat Temple. And UCF, you play tough on the road, and so it faded a little bit at the very end, and then of course once you got into what would have been the AAC tournament, it was canceled. So I think they were playing much better basketball at the end of last year, and in a building situation. I don't say a rebuild because you guys know, I mean, it's been a very long time since ECU was in a circumstance that was a net positive basketball wise. So it's a building situation. And I thought last year was a good step in that direction, but it's a long trek from a program that's not had success at what is the high major level. They may not be the absolute top of the pyramid, but it's high major basketball. And it's still an endeavor for ECU to get to be highly competitive at that level.
No question about it. And Mike, one of the things that I want to get your thoughts on is certainly help me understand, and I think that I understand, but that's one of the reasons why I told Bo to reach out to you, to have you on tonight, is the Coach K, and I know the coaches of the ACC are talking about every single team. We haven't been to the tournament since 1993. And one of the things that Joe has in the practice facility, he has the two banners up, and he says, and the other banner says, "Who's next?" Meaning what year. Will that be? Is it fair, as our good friend Stephen Igo said from hoistthecolors.net, to say that we can put a banner up for 21 if every team makes the tournament? I think it's the conference tournaments, right, that are going to eliminate all that. It seems like it's really pretty much the same deal format as far as the big dance.
Yeah, first of all, the ACC's idea will not fly at the NCAA level. I'm not sure exactly what the ACC hoped to accomplish with that. There was some conversation I had with Frank Haight from Tulsa, another AAC member. I spoke to him in the middle of the summer, and at that point, we kind of had a feeling, although certainly no certainty, and there's still no certainty, at least until later in the week, about how the season will be structured. But it was pretty much apparent that at best the non-conference season would be truncated, and possibly back then there was thought that it might not exist at all. And so how do you then establish the 68 best teams if nobody plays outside their league? And his suggestion was, if we get to that, he didn't want to do it permanently, and he didn't want to do it. Certainly didn't want this 353 idea. His idea was go to 96. Because you're probably not missing anybody good then. And I thought that that was a reasonable idea. And it still might not be an unreasonable idea if the non-conference universe is 4 games per team. But 353 teams is an unreasonable idea. That is not college basketball. That's not what March is supposed to be about. 96, what happens with 96 is you play one game. 64 teams play one game, and you're down to a 64 team bracket. So that's not that much different. And as I said, that way you don't miss anybody that's good. Everybody that's reasonably good is going to be in a 96 team universe. But with 353, you get a lot of not good. And so I don't think that that idea is a sound one. And I know it's not going to fly. Andy Katz, who does work for the NCAA, shot it down pretty quickly in his Twitter account. So I don't think we have to concern ourselves about that. But what we really have to concern ourselves about is the possibility, and I don't think it'll happen, but the possibility that the tournament could be reduced from 68 to 32 because of concerns about how they can execute a tournament virus-free or whatever, or in with as few infections as possible. I don't think that's where we'll end up, because for one, that's a massive blow to the broadcasters who carry the NCAA tournament. And it's a significant blow as well. I don't think you're going to be able to get a $750 million check from Turner and CBS if you're only giving them 31 games as opposed to 67. So I don't think that's where we'll end up, but I have a much greater concern that that would be the end game rather than 353 teams in an all-comers NCAA tournament. I know that's not going to happen.
And when we, like last year, I felt like maybe it was a little premature as far as maybe the conference tournaments, and as far as I know it was early in the game and everybody was concerned, but I would prefer having no fans, like we're seeing a lot with the NFL, and have a tournament, which I don't want that, but I would much rather have that than to have no tournament for 2 years in a row. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I felt going into all of this, and that I've had underscored for me as a fan, as well as, as a journalist, it's one thing, but as a fan, as someone who consumes, I'm a fan of particular professional teams. Those who follow me on Twitter know I'm a Steelers fan. They can look at my Twitter bio, mugshot, and see a picture of my wife and I at Anfield, which is Liverpool's home. I'm a fan of that team. So Penguins as well. Those are teams that I really care about and that I pay to watch. And as a fan, I go to see, and I love that experience of, I'm not just someone as a journalist who goes and sits in the press box all the time and sits there quietly. For the teams that, as I mentioned, I support, I go to the games and I have a good time, just like everybody else, and I pay my money. And so I miss that experience. But when it was apparent to me and to all of us that would go away, and that the games would be mostly empty stadiums, if not all entirely empty stadiums, feeling all along was, yeah, but I don't want that to be our world. But as opposed to no games, I mean, it's not even close for me. The game is what matters to me. The 50,000 fans in the stands does not make the game for me. The game does. It makes it better. But I'm watching the Steelers last night, Monday night against the Giants, and I am laser focused on the game and what's happening on the field, who's blocking who's tackling who's catching, who's dropping. I'm not really worried about whether Joe from the New York City Fire Department is in row G. It doesn't change my life that much. But whether Deontay Johnson fumbles on the 3-yard line on a punt return, that matters.
No question about it. And I know that's one thing that's going to be interesting. I don't think that, I know the NCAA can't afford 2 years without the tournament. I know another thing, Mike, that Bubba, I know it's old news, but Bubba and I were talking about 6 months ago when this was going on. Why don't you just delay the tournament. We were talking about it as it was happening, so it's not like hindsight. Why not just delay the tournament a couple months? I don't know, but hopefully, I'm just saying other possibilities is better than no tournament at all. I'm praying they don't do that. I have a friend of mine, and
That's not going to happen. I mean, for one, they can't afford it, and for two, they've had multiple examples now. I mean, I can't say, to me, the analogy I've come up with is I believe the tournament will happen with the same degree of confidence I believe the sun will come up tomorrow. So it's possible that the sun doesn't come up tomorrow, but that's the level of confidence I have that there will be a tournament. They can't afford not to. They've had multiple examples with the NHL, the NBA, the WNBA, Major League Soccer, National Women's Soccer League, all with the bubble circumstance has worked for all of them. And non-bubble, the NFL staged a weekend of games that seemed to go off with relatively little incident. Major League Baseball, non-bubble, has had some problems, but has still been able to execute a short season to this point. So basketball, again, unless there's something really calamitous that happens between now and March that goes beyond the calamity that we've already endured, they're going to have a tournament. And it's, again, the question is, will it be a full tournament? I hope so. And I don't think that at this point there's any excuse for there not being one. And will there be any necessity to go slightly beyond what a typical full tournament from 68 to 96 or something like that? But there will be March Madness. It may not be in March. That's another story, but it will happen.
All right,
Mike, we were talking in the pre-show as far as the bubbles and the possibility of playing some non-conference, as many as 8, if not more, non-conference bubble tournaments, if you will, such as down at the Orlando bubble, since that's already set up and proven to be so successful. And one of our viewers, Johnny Gardner, chimes in saying if the possible bubbles may be put in place for some of the early season tournaments, surely by the early spring they can do the same with the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, Johnny's absolutely right. I don't know for certain that's what they're going to have to do, that they're going to have to establish bubbles to conduct the tournament. But if that's the requirement, if that's what they need to do to stage it, that's what they'll do. It's a little bit less comfortable in a student-athlete environment in March to do that. In November, December, when most schools will be out of session. Most schools accelerated their fall calendars, took no fall break, their students home at Thanksgiving and not bring them back till later January, maybe even February in some cases. So that there's nothing odd about taking athletes and having games when there's no school. I mean, they've been doing that for decades. The oddity will be taking athletes while in session and putting them in a bubble to stage the tournament. There will be some discomfort with that. However, the reality is that March is already an academic bear for them. There may be less travel with the bubble, and it may actually lighten the load for the athletes because they go one place, stay that one place, don't have to move, don't have to go from the first round site to the second round site, something like that. So it might actually be academically easier for them to move forward in a March Madness that's conducted in a bubble.
Dave, you're muted.
Sorry about that. I thought it unmuted. Apologize about that. I got too excited about to ask a question. Mike, as far as when it comes to bubbles and with the NHL, how they had the Eastern Conference and the Western Conference, 2 different locations, that's something we could do, is having the bubbles for the tournament, having 4 different regions, having like 4 different sites instead of having all the different, and I know it's, again, going back to the economy and Greensboro and Charlotte and Raleigh and different places in North Carolina and different places all over the country wouldn't have those certain games. But as far in how they have the pod system going, for the first couple rounds. But wouldn't it be easier just to have 4 different regions where you could play and then move on eventually to maybe the site for the Final Four?
Yeah, I think it's very possible that that's what they would do, and they're going to have a lot of contingencies, I think, based on where the virus takes us through the next, I guess it's 6 months to March from now. So they'll have various contingencies in place. And I think your scenario is probably the most logical, to just take 16 teams to each of 4 regions and whittle it down from there. I think that's, and then stage a Final Four, whether it's in one of those 4 regions or whether they bring it here to Indy or whatever they do. I think there's some logic to that. And I don't know whether they would be beholden to the sites already selected if they don't feel like they could secure them in the way necessary to stage a bubble, or if they're in locations that don't necessarily and we don't know what it'd be like in March, but there may be some locations on the list of regionals right now that don't want to accommodate that and would rather not have that. So we don't really know for sure what it's going to be like, either in March when it would happen, or maybe in December or January when final decisions would probably have to be made.
Mike, during the pre-show, we were talking about something that I had seen yesterday. It was a tweet, I believe it was Jeff Goodman. It said the D1 Council was set to vote tomorrow, actually, tomorrow being Wednesday, the 16th of September, on the start of college hoops, proposing to start the season on November 21st, a minimum of 4 non-conference games as a recommendation, and then also a potential to start 8 hours a week of workouts beginning September 21st.
Yeah, I think that's most likely going to happen, and I'll be interested to see what the logic is on the November 21st date. That's only 11 days after the original date. The Champions Classic was supposed to take place on November 10th. That was supposed to be opening day for everyone. But and I don't know what delaying 11 days does. I don't know. Perhaps I haven't looked at the specific calendars for those schools that are going home for Thanksgiving. Maybe they are going home that Friday. And that's why they're on the 20th. I assumed that it would be early in the week because I thought they would need the days, but maybe it's not. Maybe those schools that are going home at Thanksgiving are going home that Friday, and then that's it. And then maybe that's why they're allowing the 21st or selecting the 21st as the date. I'll be curious to hear the rationale for that. But I expect that there will be multiple tournaments in Orlando. Some of the original conversations about those tournaments was that you would have the fields for the Advocare Classic, which is traditionally played in Orlando, the tournament that's traditionally played in Myrtle Beach, the tournaments that traditionally played in Charleston, all the tournaments ESPN owns, and play those tournaments in that bubble scenario, and then intermingle the fields and play more games against other teams that are already gathered there for those tournaments. That's a possibility as well. Gives ESPN programming, gives the teams the opportunity to get non-conference resumes built up and get actual game competition in place so that they can help build their teams and get ready for conference play. So all that is a possibility I think we'll see come forward once the NCAA makes their final decision on the start date.
And Mike, something that Bubba sent, I know in our group text this afternoon, knowing that you were going to be on tonight, is certainly the Maui Classic possibly be moving to, of all places, Harris Casino in Cherokee. Is that, I mean, that's a ways away from us in the western part of the state, but I would definitely make that road trip if I had a chance to see the Maui Classic in Cherokee, North Carolina. Are you kidding me, Mike?
That's one possibility. They also thought there's also thought about bringing it here in Indianapolis. And, I've been to the Maui Invitational twice, and I would love to go back. But my dream wasn't to go when it was down the street from me 45 minutes. It was to get on the flight, go 12 hours or whatever, and go back to Maui. It is a fantastic trip. If anybody ever gets a chance to go out there at Thanksgiving and see those games. And I was thinking about this earlier today, that if they do play it here in Indy at Bankers Life Fieldhouse, which holds about 20,000, you could actually have a Maui-sized crowd in Bankers Life Fieldhouse, about 2,200 or 2,400, something like that, and still be socially distanced. So you don't lose much. So it's kind of we'll see what happens with Maui. I don't know what the final decision will be on that, but Battle for Atlantis looks like it's headed to the Dakotas. It's not quite the beachy weather that the teams will be used to, but I think they'll be relieved just to get on the court and play, no matter where the games are located, after everything that the players have been through since the conference tournaments were canceled last March.
And Mike, if they have the Maui Invitational, do you think Jay Billis will still wear the Hawaiian shirt?
That's exactly. You got to. You have to. Absolutely. You might have one of those Under Armour long sleeve compression shirts under it to keep you warm, but you got to have if you're doing Maui, you have to have the Hawaiian print shirt.
Speaking of the early preseason tournaments, I know Johnny Gardner, who actually chimed in already earlier, he was talking about East Carolina's scheduled to go down to Fort Myers, Florida, to play in one of those events. So it'll be interesting to see if that is played or not.
Yeah, I think that I think those events would like to continue if possible. If the teams feel comfortable that they can that the tournaments can be staged safely, I think that those tournaments, like the Fort Myers tournament, would like to continue. I know they've been continuing to have conversations with various reporters about their fields and such. So I think that the ideal for them would be to move forward if it's possible, and I would imagine that the teams would like that because they can again get multiple non-conference games in over a short weekend, and know that they can go into the NCAA tournament selection process with something on their resume.
Looking ahead, I know we're talking about the preseason tournaments. What about your preseason? Have you made a preseason as far as the top 25, Mike? I know it's still way early, but we'd love to pick your brain a little bit. What do you think, looking an early look now on who should be? I guess it's going to be the usual suspects: Duke, Michigan State, Carolina, Kentucky. There are a lot of the blue bloods. Are there other ones as well?
I think some of the blue bloods that you mentioned, Kentucky, Carolina, I think that from the preseason perspective, I don't think the enthusiasm is quite there the way it has been in the past. Kentucky was disappointed to lose pretty much everyone except Keon Brooks, who mattered to last season's team, including guys who only mattered a little and really could have used another year. And so their team is going to be more raw than they had imagined, younger, and maybe a little bit less able to be ready early. Duke, I think, lost a lot. Also still brings some very good players back. Carolina was not good last year, and so has a long way to go to get back to that level. And so I think that it's going to be, I think the usual suspects becoming Villanova. I mean, they have, they've won 2 titles in the last 5 years. They were in the picture at the top of the bracket last year, probably going to be a 3 seed, something like that. And that was in a rebuilding year, so to speak. They're really powerful again. And I think Gonzaga as well, another team that keeps winning 30 plus games no matter who goes through. Now, they lost 2 draft picks, 2 top 20 draft picks a year ago in the first round in 2019, and then came back and won another 30 games. And they're loaded again. And so I think that you're looking at those 2 teams as being the ones that will be most often chosen as people's number 1 teams. I'm still debating between the 2 of them, probably favoring Gonzaga a little bit, but I love both of those teams, and it'll be one or the other for me.
Yeah, Gonzaga and then also that's what Baylor is a club, and those are a couple that it's such a shame that March Madness was unable to be played this past year because it was it would have been great to see how far those teams, and others would have gone.
Yeah, I mean, more than anybody, you feel for Dayton. They had they made the Final Four, the championship game in 1967, and this was easily their best team since then, if not their best team ever. And to have that blown up by what happened, it was. I look, a lot of worse things have happened as a result of this pandemic than Dayton not getting to go to the tournament. But we're having a sports conversation. And from that standpoint, it was a profound disappointment for the fans of that program, who were I think I consider Dayton fans to be the best fans in college basketball, honestly. And the reason for that is when I was covering the University of Memphis in the Great Midwest in the early 90s, I went to cover the Tigers at Dayton. It was around 92, it would have been the 93, 94 season, I believe. They were in the middle of a stretch in which they won 4 games one year and 6 games the next. So it's a combined 10 games, not conference games, games over 2 years. And they were still getting close to a sellout in a 13,000 seat arena. Not quite in those days, but close. Last year, they sold them all because they had their best team. And it was really disappointing to see Obi Toppin and the rest of that crew not get a chance to take their shot at winning it all.
Yeah, I don't know how I could have left out Obi Toppin and the Dayton Flyers, because like you said, that's a program, so much tradition, so much success. But last year was potentially their year to make that kind of run for sure. And that's what my wife's best friend from college, Crystal Sullivan, her husband Neil is the AD there at Dayton. And so pretty cool. Have not had the chance to go to a game at UD Arena, but had the chance to tour it here, I guess, about 5 years ago now, when he was actually second in command. But when he hired Anthony Grant, I told folks around here that I really liked that hire, and he thought he was going to have a lot of success.
Yeah, he was our coach of the year for 2019-20. So he ended on top. Obi won a lot of Player of the Year awards, a lot of the major awards, the Naismith Award, the Oscar Robertson Trophy. So they had a happy ending, but not the one that they had planned.
And you brought up the Memphis Tigers, and let's talk about the American a little bit. We've talked about East Carolina, but those teams that are traditionally at the top of the American, clubs like Cincinnati, Memphis, etc. So what do you think about some of them?
I think that Memphis is building a really powerful team with the way they're recruiting. And now they have to continue to progress in terms of roster management, making sure that the players are connected to the program from year to year. That's often been a problem at Memphis. They have lost some transfers over the years as they've gone from freshman to sophomore to junior, et cetera. And I think that Penny Hardaway did a nice job with last year with a lot of adversity, but it's still different to be able to win the games that win you championships. And I'm not saying he's not capable of that, but he doesn't have that experience at the Division I level, and that's that's a step he has to take as well. So there's still some hurdles for them at Memphis, but they're certainly moving in the right direction with the way they're bringing in players, the way they're handling the players in terms of giving the best players opportunity to shine, as they did a year ago with Precious Achiuwa. They did a beautiful job with him. I think that helped him become a projected top 20 draft pick in the NBA. And I think we'll see Memphis as one of the real challengers in the AAC this year, along with Houston again. Cincinnati, I think, will be dangerous. It's going to be a very compelling race. And watch out for UConn. I think they're making strides to get back to where the Huskies have traditionally been. And Danny Hurley, the terrific coach, just needs a little bit more time to get that program back.
Absolutely, will be very interesting to see how Danny Hurley and the Huskies do in the Big East for sure. But Mike, we appreciate your time tonight. Appreciate you coming on the show, and we definitely look forward to having you back on as we progress closer to the college basketball season.
Bubba, Dave, always a pleasure. Thanks so much for having me, and hopefully we'll have little bit more certainty within the next week or so about where college athletics are headed in 2020, 2021.
Sounds good, Mike. Enjoy your evening. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, guys.
Take care. All right, Mike DeCourcy there of the Sporting News. And Bubba, one of my other favorite journalists, joining us now. Appreciate him coming on. A guy that I've known for a long time. And I tell you what, I was thinking about this, Bubba. If you have a sports team and you want somebody, a great beat writer, you call this guy, right?
Yeah, we've seen this guy a lot lately. Saw him here just an hour or two ago on Mike Houston's post-practice briefing and Zoom call. Welcome into the program from Bonesville.net, Al Myatt.
Hey, thank you, Bubba. It's good to be here, and I've been looking forward to this. So we'll talk about a situation we really don't know anything about in terms of college athletics right now. I mean, everything's a lot of guesswork. I don't even think the coaches know what to expect.
Well, that's good. We can pretend like we're talking heads, right, Al? We don't even have to have facts or anything. We could just make up stuff, and it might be right. Throw up something against the wall.
Roll with the fake news, man. Let's go.
As far as the Pirates are concerned, very happy with the program with Coach Mike Houston. I know in the past we've talked about how long you've been following the program and being from the area, in the Eastern North Carolina area. But I want to get your thoughts out of the gate going into season 2020. Very happy with recruiting. Very happy as an alum. I'm trying really hard to be as objective as I can, but very proud of where things are. I was telling Bubba beforehand, it's nice to watch Mike Houston's ball clubs because in the previous administration, in the first quarter, second quarter, the game was over. There was no everything was predictable. You knew who was going to lose. You knew how much the Pirates were going to lose. It was a question of how much. And now we have a chance where we can actually, oh my gosh, we can win games again.
You know, Cincinnati and SMU last year proved that point, and Coach Houston was talking today about when the switch is flipped and they start finishing games. And Central Florida, the first opponent, is kind of a good example. Last year was a little bit like, a blowout in the first half, and then block punt kind of got things turned around, got the momentum changed, and Central Florida was glad to get out of that game last year. They were running the clock at the end of the game, and East Carolina had closed the deficit significantly. So, you look at coming into this game, and one indicator, I think, of commitment to the program right now is the number of players in a program that have opted out, maybe. And Central Florida has had, I think, 10. I saw a report earlier. And I'm not aware of anybody at East Carolina that's opted out. Those guys want to play football. So I think that's definitely a factor in the Pirates' favor.
And no doubt. I tell you what, we're very proud of Coach Houston, the recruiting. Al, you've been following the team for a good while. I think I go back to even with Holtz and, with McNeil, and you look at all the way back to that's when I first met you, is all the way back to Logan. Under Logan's tenure, he had a nice little run there with recruiting players. It looks like the recruiting is going extremely well. And you look at the one question mark might be a positive this year, Al, is we had good talent at D-line last year, but those guys played 1 million snaps. All 4 of those guys were extremely talented, but you can't have a guy that's there 50, 60 snaps at the D-line. It looks like, how many's above at the D-line now? Was it 14? It's way up there.
They were talking about that during the Zoom call today, Dave, just as far as the rotation. And I'm trying to remember who it was that asked that question, but he was talking about 12 guys rotating in along the defensive line. Okay. And one of those names on the defensive line, I'm sure there are certain ones, even though none of those guys have much experience at all. One of the names that really stands out that Coach Houston has mentioned time and time again, who's maybe a little under the radar, is Demir Faison.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I think has been the offensive defensive line, the play, and the defensive line has been good, but this gives us a chance to be even better. And Al, with Roy Tesh moving into D-line, I think those guys are going to be. I really believe. I was thinking about this morning going into work, walking in. There's going to be video game numbers for the Pirates if they can have, and I hate to use the term mediocre, but if they could even have a mediocre average defense, they can win. They win enough games to go to a bowl this year. And Al, that's another question. You're talking about guessing. Who knows if we're going to even have bowls? But I really believe that we have a good shot to make a bowl if the defense can play decent or maybe even slightly below average.
Well, I think you're right. I mean, Holton Ahlers can only be better with experience, and some great receivers, Tyler Snead and Chris Johnson, and they're talking about the depth at running back. So if they've got a ground game to go with what they've had passing the ball, that's going to be pretty special. And then you've got Blake Harrell, new defensive coordinator and new defensive scheme, and guys are feeding off his enthusiasm. There's a lot of promising aspects, but that's within the program, and you got to line up and play somebody else and make it work. So it's going to be interesting. Central Florida is picked to win the American, and East Carolina, not given much respect, I don't think, in terms of the conference race. But Mike Houston is a winner, and he's proved that at Citadel. He's proved it at James Madison, proved it at Lenore Ryan. So, I think he's going to be working until he does get it turned around. And you talk about the recruiting. The recruiting is great. And you talk about the Skip Holtz era that we recall, and they had some great defensive linemen during that period. And several of those guys went up. I guess Linville Joseph is still playing in the league. And you had the young man from Belhaven. I can't call his name at the moment, but he played some for the Packers. And he's the
C.J.
one.
Wilson.
He took that. C.J. Wilson took the they had a conversion. I think he blocked it and took it. I want to say he took it back against Southern Miss But the defensive lineman and Holtz was great at playing to his strengths, and he had a ball control offense, and he had a very good front defensively, and he made that work. It appears that East Carolina has a lot of potential strengths going into this season. And you talk about going back to the Holtz era. I asked a question on the Zoom conference today about Pat Dye. And I was actually at the Washington Daily News there on the Pamlico River when Pat Dye was coaching a portion of his career at East Carolina. And, you talk about Holtz and you talk about some other excellent East Carolina coaches. Steve Logan is in that group, of course. But Pat Dye was in a league of his own, and he went on and proved it at Auburn. And I would like to see some sort of significant recognition of his contributions to East Carolina football. He was a coach when East Carolina went from playing Appalachian State and Furman in the Southern Conference to being an independent. And they went and played everybody. I mean, they played Auburn, Penn State, whoever they could get a date with, they played. And they, of course, Dye won some on the road, in games with Chapel Hill, NC State. And he really kind of got the program launched into major college football. I would like to see him recognized. I hope that'll happen.
And that he was actually that coach alluded to that very fact about talking to Coach Dye. That was at our event to honor the 1978 Independence Bowl team at Professor Pools in Greenville. Coach Dye was on the phone with us, and he asked about the new coach, and he said, will you tell him I said to get his blank here? And lo and behold, 10 or 15 minutes later, there's Coach Houston. So if you don't think Pat Dye is significant to East Carolina football, you don't think Pat Dye means a lot to the program, most coaches like Mike Houston would have never come. But the fact that Mike Houston was asked by Coach Dye to show up and to talk to him, that was just something that you'll never see probably again that'll ever happen.
I remember Pat Dye came back during the Ruffin McNeil coaching era for a game against Carolina.
That's correct.
And I don't remember if that was the game that ECU scored 70.
It was.
Okay, so there you go.
2014.
There you go. So Pat Dye was a great coach. I remember his son was playing for Greenville Rose, and I was working on the paper in Rocky Mount. And Bill Merrifield, who went out and played some AAA baseball, his son is playing Major League Baseball now with Merrifield. But he was a quarterback for Rocky Mount, and Rocky Mount won the regular season game against Rose, and then they met again in the playoffs. And Pat Dye was up at Municipal Stadium in Rocky Mount, and I remember seeing him after that game. And Rose really had more talent than Rocky Mount. Rocky Mount did well to win the first meeting, but he was there following his son. His son has since become a successful sports agent, I think, and
Right.
very good golfer too. Pat Dye Jr.
Yeah, he was on. We did a special tribute to Coach Dye, and after his passing, and Pat Dye Jr. is awesome, and we'll look forward to having him back on. And I know that recently, Al, they had the last coaches meeting. They actually last players meeting. They had a very special event for Coach Dye in the last month or so down there in Auburn, actually on his farm. Players from both East Carolina and Auburn players were invited to that last players meeting. Very special. Our friend Terry Gallagher that comes on, that Al, that comes on the show a lot. He told us about it, and very special times. A lot of great. There was a number of Auburn players there, obviously, because there are a lot of guys closer. But some East Carolina former players under Coach Dye went there to honor their former coach.
That's great. Pat Dye, of course, changed that Iron Bowl series because he told Bear Bryant that they were going to play some games at Auburn. And they had played at Legion Field in Birmingham for a long time. And then I guess Alabama built their stadium, and they've been playing a home and home. But Pat Dye told Bear Bryant that they were going to do that. No disrespect to Bear, but Pat Dye was standing up for the program he coached at Auburn. So,
no question about it.
Yep.
As far as now, what was cool about that moment with Mike Houston and Pat Dye is I sort of see, not to put pressure on Coach Houston and certainly not to compare, but Pat Dye was a winner, and I really believe, Al, that Mike Houston's a winner, and I really believe that year 4 or 5, especially, well, definitely next year, 21, this group of what will be seniors and juniors. There's a lot of talent. Add the experience of this year, and then by next year, they're going to be competing for a conference championship. I really believe that, and I have a lot of faith in Mike Houston, even before he came here, and still, I've been really pleased at the things he's been doing.
Well, I agree, and I think a lot of things speak for themselves in terms of recruiting and some competitive games with nationally ranked teams last year. One thing that East Carolina is dealing with in this conference is a relative lack of resources. And, you're familiar with some of the financial situations, and this coronavirus pandemic is certainly not going to make things any better because of the significance of ticket revenue to East Carolina's program. So that affects recruiting budget, affects coaching salaries, what you can pay your staff, how much staff you can have. We still don't have an indoor practice facility for football that a lot of other schools do. And Dave Hart was explaining to me, a lot of schools in this conference receive a lot of fees and money that East Carolina does not, in terms of support from student fees and things that they're not allowed to do in North Carolina for university funding of athletics in this state. So, you're kind of giving everybody else a head start in this situation. And it doesn't take a good coach to battle those odds. It takes a great coach. But, maybe we're talking about Mike Houston in that sense, 4 or 5 years down the road.
And not only that, Bubba, one of the things that is frustrating for me is that I'm hoping, Al, that I understand the financial concerns, and then oh my gosh, then that we had, and then we have with COVID-19 hitting us right here in 2020. But I'm really praying that we have some kind of plan as far as indoor practice facility. We need that desperately. The weather, as you know, Al, and the climate in Eastern North Carolina. I remember, I think it was 2017. Coach Montgomery said there was 9 afternoons in the fall that they couldn't practice because of the weather in Eastern North Carolina. We desperately need that. I think that if the administration will just put it out there that we have a plan, I really believe there's a lot of different big donors and people like me that maybe I can give $100 extra here and there, but give the fans what they want and help
That's
the
right.
program out too.
Well, you were talking about the bowl situation earlier, and I think there were 41 bowls last year, and there's, I think, 78 teams scheduled to play football in the traditional time frame that of the fall this year. And of course, you do the math, and that's 82 teams. So the bowls are going to be interesting to see how that develops. And I think the playoff, the playoff people are talking about they're going to do their playoff, and some of the lesser bowls are going to maybe fall by the wayside. Some teams that normally would not go to a major bowl are probably going to get upgraded, and it's going to be interesting to see how that shakes out.
Just talking about the environment in terms of college football within the state of North Carolina, not being able to have fans at games. App State played Charlotte at home on this past weekend with a 2-touchdown victory. North Carolina hosted Syracuse, but you could really sense Coach Houston's frustration with the powers that be in the state of North Carolina in terms of having to distribute 50 tickets and the headaches that brings him and his staff, as opposed to just 300, 400, 500.
The provisions in I guess we're in the 2.5 phase in the reopening of the state. There ought to be a little more common sense in terms of, how a football stadium is populated in a game with respect to the social distancing that you want to have with the coronavirus. There's plenty of room for those 50 people that are going to be admitted, so that's not a problem. But I think you could have significantly more than 50 and not be endangering anyone. And I hate it for the football fans that won't be there. I hate it for the players that can't play in that special environment that Dowdy-Ficklin Stadium becomes in a big game. And it's a sad thing for the culture of East Carolina football that these various restrictions are in place, and they're going to make the best of it. I'm glad that at least some parents will be there to see their sons play, but they could do a lot better than that. And we're talking about people that plan and issue the rulings that affect millions of people's lives, and this is all the thought that's gone into it. Is 50 people in a football stadium. They had 17,000 the other night to watch the Kansas City Chiefs out in Kansas City. So I don't think those people are in any less danger than the 50 that will be at Dowdy-Ficklin Stadium as planned on September 26th.
Yeah, like you were saying, 17,000 plus in Kansas City. Florida State had 21 or 22,000 in an environment that really seemed the most football-like environment in terms of being close to what it typically would be, having some fan support and some energy in the stadium rather than just pumped-in crowd noise. But nonetheless, it's great to see football. And I referenced some of those games that took place. And this weekend, you have Wake Forest traveling down to Raleigh to take on NC State. You have App State traveling up to Marshall in what should be a heck of a game. Actually, just got bumped from 1:30 to 3:30, and there are also other games within the state, Duke and Boston College, etc. So, what do you think on some of that action this coming weekend?
Well, Wake Forest got beat as expected by Clemson in the season opener, #1 team. Appalachian had a challenge with Charlotte. Charlotte's at UNC, I believe, this weekend. And that Marshall game with Appalachian, that should be a real head knocker. Campbell is going to Coastal Carolina, and Coastal Carolina coming off a win on the road over a Power 5 team, although they may be the least powerful of anybody in the Power 5, Kansas. But Campbell showed up and took it to Georgia Southern pretty good for a long time. Saturday had a 10-point lead and fell a point short, but that's going to be an interesting game. That's going to be on ESPN Friday night. And Campbell is on East Carolina's schedule in a couple of years. Mike Minter, the former Panthers safety, is getting that program going pretty well. And Coastal Carolina, they're stepping it up athletically. Won the NCAA baseball tournament a couple of years ago. So it's a lot of good games, like you say. Going to be a great weekend for East Carolina not to be playing, I think, with all the good games there will be to watch.
For sure. That Campbell game was so entertaining. I was glued to it, and it was so heartbreaking to not see the Campbells bring that back home to Bowie's Creek because they certainly left it all on the field, and not surprising that they went for two at the end there. But at the same time, I mean, it's easy to second guess. I know one of our co-hosts, Kyle, he was saying that he thought maybe with the depth issues for Georgia Southern, and given that Campbell had moved the ball pretty consistently throughout that ball game, he didn't know that was necessarily what he would have done. But it didn't shock me, and yeah, it will be very interesting to see if with Coastal Carolina coming off that 2-touchdown win out at Kansas, if Campbell can maybe make it interesting again down at Conway this weekend.
I remember a game Steve Logan went for a 2 against West Virginia, and he got a lot of criticism. But if you go to win a game and you got a chance to win the game, take that chance. And that's what Logan did, and that's what Mike Minter did last Saturday. And, one play to win or lose in an adverse situation, a lot of coaches, man up and go for it.
And Al, you know what the great thing about it, the ball is at the 2-yard line. I mean, you go ahead and you have a chance, just like Logan did, with people may not know about that game. And the very fact is that was when overtime had just started, and there was thank God, no more ties, which I absolutely hated as a kid, but that's a whole nother show. But the fact that you had overtime, well, you know what? You don't know what the one good thing about putting that ball at the 2-yard line for a 2-point conversion, you know what your chances are. But when you get in that overtime, in other words, you get a chance to win the game right there on the last play, as Logan was yelling the next week. And the very fact that we had a chance to win that game right then and there in regulation versus putting the game into overtime when you don't know what's going to happen.
Well, it's like Jeff Lebo said about shortening the shot clock. More possessions give the team with more talent a better opportunity to win. So if you can reduce it to one play and take your shot, that's a good scenario in a lot of cases.
No question. But I wanted to ask, I'm actually homeschooling and doing a show at the same time. But anyway, I wanted to ask you, forgive me if, but one of the questions that certainly comes to mind, what are your thoughts? I know you've asked Coach about adding games. Don't you, this is my personal thing. I've said it off the air. I don't think I've said it on the air yet, but I'm worried about the fact that we have the number of games that, like, for example, if you have 9, if you lose a few games, then you're down to like 6 games. I would much rather Not trying to play Monday morning or this particular case Tuesday night quarterback, but I'm just worried that if you have 9 games, what if you lose 2 or 3 games versus if you schedule 11 or 12, then if you lose a couple, you're not hurt as bad. That's just my
Well, more games would generally mean more revenue. And right now, the revenue situation is reduced. I'm not really sure of the value of playing more games right now in terms of revenue. I'm sure that's a bottom line consideration there. And this is a late start because already have missed 3 weeks going into the season. So that's 3 games in a 12-game season, and there are 10 games scheduled at the present time. Is that right?
I think it's 9, right?
9? Okay. So
Yeah, we're hoping to reschedule that Marshall
right. That
game.
would be
Okay.
good. We have the Marshall game.
First week in December.
I don't know how much we want to play Marshall the way they started out the first game, but we'll have to wait and see. If we're 5-0, bring them on. And we'll play anybody, like they used to say, anybody, anywhere, anytime. But right now they can focus on the American Conference, and I think there's one non-conference game at Georgia State right now. Is that right?
That's correct. In October.
So, if they could get this first game with Central Florida, there's unlimited potential. The Big Ten and Pac-12, it doesn't look like they're going to play anytime soon. So that reduces significantly the number of power programs, and you win that first game, and you just set up a lot of good potential possibilities.
And I was telling you guys, Bubba, the very fact that the first game, they have this weekend, they have Georgia Tech. And Georgia Tech, it looks like with Jeff Collins is a good football team, or certainly they're improved things in Atlanta. But Al, the great thing about being the first game and it's UCF, another way to look at it is the fact they don't know what we're going to do. So they're coming in there blind. Yeah, everybody can say we're not ready, but I mean, I have a hard time believing that Coach Mike Houston and his staff, knowing him the little bit that we do know him in the media, that team is going to come unprepared for Central Florida. UCF, I really have a hard time believing that.
Well, he addressed that situation a little bit, talking about the Marshall game earlier, because after the Marshall game was moved to September 12th, Marshall scheduled, I want to say Eastern Kentucky, I think, the week before. So, they were going to get the kinks out before they came to Greenville. But Mike Houston said at the same time, we'll have tape of Marshall this year that we can break down. They won't have any tape of us that they can study. But, having a game under your belt, and coaches used to say there's more improvement from week 1 to week 2 than at any other time during the season. So that might be a factor that's in UCF's favor, although Georgia Tech did beat Florida State last week. So that is going to be a real challenge. And they will have all their attention on Georgia Tech this week, while East Carolina is focusing on UCF.
Yeah, like Blake Carroll, East Carolina defensive coordinator. I don't know where we're getting that feedback from. I noticed it with you too, Dave. But anyway, Blake Harrell, East Carolina defensive coordinator, was on the Brian Bailey show on Pirate Radio on Monday. So just hearing what he said as far as obviously advantages and disadvantages of it. One of the advantages is the fact that you have the opportunity to see what UCF does with its personnel. You referenced them having 10 guys that have opted out. So it'll be interesting to see how they do in Atlanta.
Yes, it will. That's another good game that'll be on this weekend, I guess.
Kind of transitioning, I know you're a Wake Forest guy. You played basketball for the Deacons back in the day. So obviously they had a coaching change. So Steve Forbes coming in. So what do you think about that hire and the tremendous job that he did at East Tennessee?
Well, he did a great job at East Tennessee. He's brought in, some transfers, and it's going to be interesting to see. He couldn't keep the big man, Olivier Sarr, in the program. He went to Kentucky, and I really like his talent. He was a big factor in the win over Duke and Winston-Salem last year, but Coach Forbes couldn't keep him in the program. But you know, you don't win 32 games without doing something right, like he did at East Tennessee State last year. And John Curry, the AD at Wake now, was in the athletic administration at Tennessee when Steve Forbes was an assistant to Bruce Pearl there at Tennessee. So he knew him previously, and obviously he had confidence in him to come in and develop the program, do things right, graduate players, and hang banners and all of that. So it'll be interesting to see. But, you know, Danny Manning was there 6 years. He won at Tulsa. He couldn't really ever get it going at Wake Forest. You know, John Collins left for the NBA after the only NCAA appearance, I think, during the Manning tenure. It's just a very tough conference to gain traction in and go forward once you're in that building situation.
Al, I was very surprised by the very fact that he didn't do better than he did. I know it's the ACC, and I get all that, and I have, obviously we're in ACC country, but I just had a rule. I thought that, I'm not saying that I thought he would win the league, but I didn't think it would be as bad as that it turned out. And I'm also surprised, I guess maybe the buyout, but I was really surprised that he made it 6 years.
There was an athletic director transition during that time.
Right.
And after they made the NCAA tournament in 2017, I think, they extended Manning long-term into the middle of this decade, I think. And so that's where the big buyout came in, and they would have loved to have seen him get it turned around. And then Curry came in, kept him for last season. But, you know, I think this past year, even though they beat North Carolina and Duke and Winston-Salem, you know, that really wasn't enough to swing things back and gain the fan base's confidence. Attendance was down, and oftentimes you have repercussions in terms of support for your booster club in those situations. So Curry pulled the trigger. It was like a month after the season, and he evaluated everything and made the move. And I was talking to Joe Dooley a little bit about, because he knew Danny Manning when they were both on the staff at Kansas. And it was when Dooley had an assistant position open. I said, well, are you going to hire Danny Manning? And he said, oh, I think Danny is going to go into TV, do some TV. And he's working on getting his money from Wake Forest, because I think Wake Forest is kind of still balking at paying the full buyout there. And I'm not sure the factors involved, but that may be an ongoing situation.
No doubt about it. As far as Dooley's concerned, how do you feel about things this year for ECU and the American?
Well, you know, when you get guys that Duke and Memphis are after, and, you know, you got Charles Coleman last year and Farrakhan this year that had attracted interest from a number of, you know, respected programs. You got to think recruiting is going pretty well. They had some significant injuries with big guys last year. It's a tough conference to get traction in, but Joe Dooley is going to outwork about anybody out there, and I'm sure he expects the same thing of his staff. It looks like it's paying off in recruiting and trying to build a foundation where there's been very little in terms of basketball at East Carolina, but Joe Dooley is really determined to get it done. And, you know, he's going to outwork, like I say, going to outwork about everybody out there.
There's no question about that. When it comes to the recruiting trail, he's impressed me with that. And then obviously with the assistant coaches are tremendous. Probably the best coaching staff. I don't know, you follow the program. I didn't become a Pirate until age 13 and then 86, but for the longest time that I've seen Pirate basketball, this is probably far, I still think, the best staff we've ever had. in the coaching staff, top to bottom, or I hate to say top to bottom, but from all the assistants and Coach Dooley, and with the recruiting, we're getting guys that normally we probably would never get. The Farrakhan kid there in Jersey coming down is a tough kid that I know Joe had a relationship with. And I think that's you hear that all the time about recruiting being relationships, but it seems like Joe Dooley, one of the things that we're hearing is the fact that he's not promising these guys all the things that other schools are. He's being real with them, and I think that's played a big difference.
Well, that's the best way to go. Honesty is the best policy, as they say. And really, all you're doing with anybody offering them a scholarship is giving them a chance to compete for playing time. And, I respect Joe with that approach. And, talking about coaching staffs, Eddie Payne was the last East Carolina coach to get the Pirates into the NCAA tournament. And Joe Dooley was on Eddie Payne's staff. Eddie Payne left for Oregon State and subsequently won some big games there, kind of like Danny Manning we were talking about, beat some name programs, but not on a consistent enough basis to stay there. And then Eddie went to South Carolina Upstate, finished his career there. But that was a good staff. Any staff with Joe Dooley is going to be a good staff. He won national championship there at Kansas on Bill Self's staff. So,
yeah.
No question about it.
And forgive me if you already mentioned this when you were talking about Coach Dooley, but when he was down there at South Carolina on Eddie Fogler's staff, and that connection with Tubby Smith and High Point came in, and I'm sure that the Pirates may play High Point in the future.
Yeah, I mean, scheduling right now is just at a standstill, I guess. But I think I saw something last week where the American was considering playing 20 games, everybody home and home. And because they may eliminate some of the non-conference matchups, I'm not sure how that's going to work.
Yeah, I was wondering that very thing. And then obviously we were talking to Myatt DeCourcy, obviously, earlier in the show about the bubble situation. Are you a fan of that, of having like maybe Orlando or different places where you play non-conference games?
Dave, I'm a fan of being able to watch games. And I don't care where they play, as long as I can sit on my couch and tune them in with the remote, I'm good. And if that's a safer situation for the teams involved, so be it. More power to them. And the NBA, I think, has had the best situation with the bubble, and they've really been tight on access to that area where the teams have been quartered and play their games, and that's worked. Major League Baseball, not as successful. And then, college football, I think Houston had an outbreak, and they're not going to play. Memphis is scheduled, and NC State, North Carolina, East Carolina have all had to shut down programs for a portion of time in the preseason. East Carolina rescheduling, NC State rescheduling because of that. I think the bubble is the way to go, as much as you can duplicate that NBA model. And I know that Coach Houston was saying the other night they will go to a hotel after they do their Friday COVID testing on the 25th, and they will try to create a bubble there at the hotel that they stay in the night before the game. So, it's all about isolating within a protected group, a testing negative group, and protect yourself in that manner.
And Dave, very quickly, I wanted to correct something. A moment ago, I said Joe Dooley had been on Eddie Fogler's staff. I meant George Felton.
Correct. Yes, sir.
Yeah, as far as Al, I know we talked about basketball and football with you. One of the things that killed me back in the spring is as much as we love Cliff Godwin, with that unbelievable talent coming back, it was my heart breaks for him and all the spring sports for sure. Do you think, this is a generic question, do you think we'll be done with COVID by then, by baseball season? Is there a
I thought it
possible?
was going to be 2 or 3 months at the max, back in March. So we're way past that timeline now. A lot of people think that things are going to change significantly November 3rd after the election, but we will see what we see. And I think what we found out is best just to live and plan more or less a day at a time, because you really don't know what the future holds within this situation.
No question. Hopefully it'll be done. I wish it was done in July. So when people talk about the election, I really thought it was going to be done by the middle of summer. And so obviously it's obvious that I'm not a fortune teller, and I'm not a gambling man. I would lose everything I had if I were. So I don't bet on games or any of that kind of stuff, because we don't know what the future holds. Like you said, even with the games. And that's why I know there are a lot of people that are not giving the Pirates a chance, and it may sound like I'm a homer, but I really believe, Al, that we've got a shot in next week, and more so than people probably giving us credit. So hopefully we can do that. As far as your work, I want to give you a chance to plug. I could talk to you all night long. I enjoy your company. I enjoy all that you do for ECU and certainly Bonesville, but obviously you've got your own site too with Dunn Area Sports, right?
Dunn Area Sports, and we cover Harnett County, which includes Campbell, and the public schools, Midway, Hobton, Triton, Harnett Central, Western Harnett, Overhills, and Cape Fear Christian Academy, the private school in the area. And I've enjoyed that. That was kind of a spinoff from Bonesville. Danny Whitford, the editor and publisher of Bonesville, kind of enabled me to do that website starting a couple of years ago, and I've really enjoyed it. And it's been fun. I like giving the athletes and the teams recognition that deserve it, and appreciate you mentioning that, Dave.
Well, certainly, and it's going to be weird, Al, to have high school football. My birthday is April 14th, and it's going to be weird to have high school football near my birthday.
The state championships are May 28th, I think. So,
yeah,
they are for a long time. They pushed for spring football in North Carolina, and this year they've got it. So, there you go.
They do it. Thanks for the visit, Al. Look forward to hopefully we have you back on during football season, and hopefully we can have a season as smooth as possible when it comes to Mike Houston and staff.
Hoping and praying. And thank you so much, Dave, for having me on, and be glad to come back on anytime you like. I've enjoyed it.
I've enjoyed it too. Thank you, my friend. Appreciate it, and we'll see you again real soon.
Sounds good. Thank you, sir.
Thanks,
all
Al.
Right. Al Myatt there. Appreciate him very much for all that he does for the Pirates with Bonesville, and obviously Dunn Area Sports is a really great website. I've checked it out, and obviously checked it out over the last couple of days as well. Appreciate all that he does for the high school athletes in that area. It's a really good website. If you get a chance, if you're in the Dunn area, or even if you're not, check it out. I appreciate Al for all that he does for high school and collegiate sports, for sure.
Yeah, Al's a great guest. He's done this a long time, done it very well, and really enjoyed having him on the show for the first time on Facebook and YouTube. We had him on, I believe, several months back. Maybe it was last football season, just audio only. But look forward to having Al back down the road when we're playing some football.
No question, and it's certainly then. And basketball is going to be great. And when you look at the big three, if you will, with baseball, basketball, and football, oddly enough, the virus may be odd, but maybe a great year for all three of the sports. We know baseball is going to be good. Basketball, I think, is going to be a lot better under Coach Dooley's third season, and with Mike Houston's second season, you never know, right, Bubba? That's a great thing about you have to lace them up, and we can all talk about how Central Florida UCF is better on paper and all this or that, but I saw my team on Sunday down 17, scored 27 unanswered in pro football. So we'll see how anything's possible. Anything's possible, my friend.
Yeah, who would have thought last year that we would have done what we did, even even be it in a losing effort against Cincinnati and SMU, nobody would have thought we would have been competitive outside of ourselves in terms of inside our locker room, because our offense had been hit or miss, more miss up to that point in the season, and then we just exploded that night with Holton throwing for 500 plus against a very good Cincinnati defense.
And there were 2 years ago. Let's talk about that game at Dowdy-Ficklin. The very fact that you remember that with the UCF game, we actually had a chance with Holton is going in the end zone, and you think it's a touchdown. Instead, it was a fumble, and they run it back. I mean, that was a real backbreaker. But that if you get that touchdown, I believe that would have cut the game to 7, right? Only down a touchdown.
Yeah, Mac, the quarterback that night, they opted to play him to get him some experience, rest Mackenzie Milton. They were coming off that victory out at Memphis, and Milton was maybe a little beat up, and they got Mac some experience. He's a guy from the 7.57, and he obviously
opted out.
Oh yeah, that's what I was just alluding to. Or getting to, I should say, that Mac is one of those 10 who opted out. So Mackenzie Milton, I believe, is back and available to play from what I'm hearing. So look forward to catching up with Jeff Allen and seeing, in fact, if Mackenzie Milton is the number 2 quarterback right now behind Dylan Gabriel down in Orlando.
That's a great story, too, with Mackenzie Milton. Who would have ever thought that he could make it back, and he's done a great job. Working his tail off, but I guess we shouldn't be surprised knowing how great that kid is and how competitive he is, real competitor. So that'll be great to see. And I know, Bubba, we've got a lot of great content coming up this week. Before we go, I wanted to promote that.
Yeah, on Thursday night, we'll be catching up with our good friend Terry Gallagher. We'll take a look at the season, get Terry's thoughts on things. Terry's relocated to North Carolina. He's down in the Wilmington area, so we'll talk to Terry, and then about halfway through, we'll be joined by Mike Mully, with 5-Star Virtual. We'll talk a variety of sports topics with Mully, and then on Saturday morning, 8:30, right here on Facebook and YouTube Live, we will have the Inside Slant. We'll take a look at Week 3 of college football. We'll catch up with Keith Morehouse from WSAZ up in Huntington. The 24th ranked App State Mountaineers are traveling to Edwards Stadium to take on the Herd. So we'll talk to him about that. We'll also catch up with Jeff Allen. We've talked about that Georgia Tech UCF matchup in Atlanta. Jeff is with the Nightline Sports Network. We've had a good relationship with him over the last year plus. So look forward to getting his thoughts on that one. Ryan Token of the Golden Herdcast. We'll talk Tulsa, Oklahoma State. David Scott of the Charlotte Observer will join us to talk about the 49ers of UNC Charlotte traveling down to take on the Tar Heels, who were ranked 12th this week. And then Rob McClam of Inside Pack Sports will talk NC State and Wake Forest.
Yeah, that's going to be great. And by the way, I was just thinking, with Terry, usually tells us a nice day, sunny day in central Georgia. He's going to be now, obviously, he's working down in his home in central Georgia and getting ready to finish things up there. And they've already moved to Wilmington, and not too far away from one of my favorite places, and that's the battleship, the USS North Carolina. I'm wondering maybe if we could talk to the Pirate Radio. I know on the IMG Learfield network there with Marty Fuhrer. He was working for the battleship at one time. Wonder if he would let us do a show there. What do you think? And get Turry. We'll come to his town, coming to your city.
Who knows? Maybe so. And Kyle was chiming in, saying when we were talking about have Terry on Thursday, he said, hold up. And he said, back up, Terry, and put it in reverse, Terry.
Exactly. Can't wait to spend time with Kyle and Turry and the port city now. So glad to have him in the great state of North Carolina. And he's always been a Pirate Nation, but man, he's really, really close, only a couple hours away from Greenville to East Carolina. And certainly I know his wife, his bride, Gail, to get her back in North Carolina. is something that I think it was 1981. They went down there, not to give his bio, but I know they're glad to be back in North Carolina for sure. Great to have our great guest, Michael DeCourcy, obviously the sporting news of the Big Ten Network, and of course, Al Myatt of Bonesville.net and Dunn Area Sports. Appreciate him very much for the time. And Bubba, appreciate you working hard behind the scenes as always. Another great show in the books. We're going to put this one to bed. You've been listening to The Sports Objective and watching The Sports Objective. Go Pirates. Good night, everybody.